Want to welcome you to another episode of Breaking Barriers podcast. I'm Gary Bontrager, your host. This is a special one for me. I am sitting here with Ivan and Dean Carroll. And as a young man, when I first started watching tractor pulls, the interesting part was these folks would come up from Missouri and they had a Cockshutt, which was very unusual for us. And I just remember thinking how incredibly famous these folks were that they would drive that far to come to a tractor pull. So as a young person, we've been a long way. We were excited to see you guys. So welcome to the podcast.
Good to be here.
So what are some of your earliest, do you have some memories of when you started, or what got you to start pulling tractors in the beginning, Ivan?
Started pulling with an older tractor, 3 or 4 years older.
Maybe older than that. A Cockshutt 40 diesel that he first started pulling.
Okay.
Decided that I needed a bigger tractor. That wasn't going to cut it.
That wasn't going to cut it. So when you first pulled, though, what'd you guys use for a sled, and what kind of?
Well, the first started it was a walk-on.
Okay.
And Elmer Dice?
Delmer Keiss.
Keiss. You ever hear of him?
I haven't.
He was from up in Arbela in the Memphis, Missouri area.
Okay.
He ran a sled. He built the first power sled that I know.
He had the first weight transfer, probably in, I don't know if the whole state, but he was early in North Missouri as far as a weight transfer machine.
So when you guys started, though, how many years did you pull the 40 and that walk-on sled? That was just a farm tractor, I would have to.
Well, the 40 has a story to it as well.
What was that story?
He bought that 40 from a John Deere dealer. It was probably about 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
The 40 tins were out, and there was a local Cockshutt dealer in Clarence, and he'd sold 3 or 4 tractors.
Right.
Well, this particular customer, I guess, he wanted more horsepower.
Right.
And so he traded it in on a 4010.
Right.
And Dad just happened to see it on the John Deere lot in Shelbina, and knew that he could probably buy that tractor for decent money, down the line. He bought it and brought it down. Well, we used it for everything for quite a while, but that was probably in about 64, 65.
Okay.
And we were little tykes, but we tagged along. Of course, we just ate it up. And he ran it one season or two. Every little town in North Missouri had a farm tractor pull. He'd run what you brung type situation. And he turned the pump up, of course. It had a 4-cylinder Perkins diesel in it. And pulled a few events that away. One got his taste. And but he went to a farm sale. And I want to say it was about 67.
Okay.
A farm sale up in the La Plata, Missouri area. And this gentleman who had this small farm had worked for M&W Equipment Company, and during that they sold a lot of turbo kits, especially for the 4020s.
Yes. And
this guy somehow made it out of the plant with a turbocharger. And Dad's at this farm sale, and they have the wagons around, and they get to this box, and guys are, looking in it. What is that? And the guy pulls it up out there in a big plastic bag, and somebody says, well, that's a blower, And so he came home from that sale with an M&W turbocharger for like $55 or something like that.
Wow.
$35.
Okay. Anyway, and so it made its way onto the old 40.
Barely buy the bolts to pull them on anymore for that.
It made its way onto the old 40 diesel.
Yeah.
Well, that just changed everything. And of course, just up the horsepower unbelievably. And we hit these same little pulls in that summer. And I can remember, I do not remember the town. It was north of here, small little town. And you weighed in at the scales at the grain elevators.
Yes, very common.
And then you either hauled or drove out to their site where they're going to have the pull. And he pulls in, weighs, And it's got this, he had a car breather on the side of the hood.
Right.
And of course, coming out of the turbo, whatever he'd found for an elbow exhaust pipe, it made a big swoop and came up, you know, and these guys were trying to decide what class to enter that thing in. They didn't know what a Cockshutt was. And it had this breather hanging outside the hood and this exhaust, and in that day, they had classes, you know, they were called blower, non-blower, and hot rod.
Okay.
And the hot rods were, most of them were old F20 Farmalls or maybe a Massey Harris 44, and someone had put a car engine in it.
Right.
And that was the hot rod. Well, they put him in the hot rod class. I do remember that. Well, there was no chance in there running against you know, a 396, 427 Chevy or 383 Chrysler or something. But
sometime along the way, I remembered that the engine, little 4-cylinder Perkins, just has 3 main bearings.
right.
And I thought, now that ain't gonna work doing what we're doing to it.
Right.
So,
And that tractor did suffer probably from that early abuse because in the early 70s we had a huge flood because the river plugged with a log jam, and it just flooded everything. And the Corps of Engineers brought a pump for us to use to pump fields out, and that 40 was sitting down there on the levee pumping water and broke the crank. No load whatsoever, you know. So it had probably already suffered its damage from the turbo. But mentioning those old hot rods, his actual first farm tractor in about 1957, of course I wasn't around, but he and Mom talked about this. He took an F20 Farmall and put a Oldsmobile Rocket 88 V8 and the hydromatic transmission in that F20 Farmall in about 1957 and farmed with it.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean, he's always been kind of a gearhead and always played with stuff, had the cars and all that stuff before.
Just couldn't leave your hands on, let something alone.
No, he couldn't leave it alone.
Interesting.
But I didn't mean to deviate.
No, that's fine.
But
So
that kind of gives you a little background on the way he thinks, you know.
So the 40 was the beginning, and how many years did you pull that thing then?
oh, not very long.
No.
Because the crankshafts had broke.
But he probably made it to about 68 with that one. And then maybe had a little time off, and he found a 50, the next step up, Cockshutt. Really the only difference were the bull gears were about 3/8 of an inch wider. And of course they had a little higher horsepower. They came with a Buddha 6-cylinder diesel. Or a Buddha, the Buddha 6-cylinder diesel was 273 cubic inch. The gasoline was 230. And he found one of those sitting alongside the road somewhere and bought it and started to think, I'm going to build this tractor. Well, then he found out that the Buddha was the same engine that Alice Chalmers was using. And the Alice Chalmers version was a 262. They'd kind of tweaked it themselves. But you could interchange these parts. So you could take a 262 crankshaft and put it in a 273 and you'd have like a 290 something. So he was kind of in the process of that and not going real fast. And then that's where the 570 came into picture. And he can maybe tell you some of that.
So you never pulled the 50 then, necessarily?
No.
We
kind of got in the middle of it and we're like, why are we doing this?
When you can go
we can go to the 570 that's got the later model engine, more potential, better rear end transmission. But
we was going to wife's uncle up in
Moline,
Carbondale or somewhere. And on the way there, we saw a Cockshutt or two sitting out in the field. And sitting close to a building, it wasn't out in the field. Anyway, I said, well, I believe that's a 570. And it looks funny. It's a tricycle front end. And well, we can use that all right. So anyway, we decided that we'd see if we could buy it. And I found out this lady had it And she didn't want it, didn't she?
No, she didn't want to sell it. There on that.
She didn't want to sell it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We saw it, yeah. And
So we saw him again. We stopped by on the way home from up there. And he decided, no, I won't sell. But he said, my neighbor right down the road, half a mile well, said he actually pulls it some. And I said, oh, really?
Well, now you got somewhere.
he had several, this particular man, Lloyd Douglas, had several of these 570 Cockshutts. And so we stopped in there and visited with him, and this is around Dixon, Dixon, Illinois. Anyway, and so he, I believe I would sell my tractor.
Right.
And he had already been pulling the 570.
Right.
He called it Super Cecil, was the name of that particular tractor.
Okay.
And Lloyd Douglas, by the way, was one of the very first announcers at the Louisville Farm Show pull.
And that's the guy you got this Cockshutt from.
And he had already, it's a long story, but he knew people at Cockshutt, the company.
Right. And
Cockshutts, those later series, the 500 series up, they used a Hercules engine.
Okay.
You've probably heard of Hercules.
Sure, have.
Industrial engines,
Right.
They put them in tractors and generator sets and water pumps and
Bottom loaders.
Yep.
And they put them in a lot of
those.
military use. Well, he knew guys at the Hercules engine plant as well, because of
All
being in the know and all the interaction with
Right.
Louisville and all that. So he actually got that tractor chassis from Cockshutt without anything on it. Basically, a tricycle front end, no accessories.
Right.
Plain Jane. And then he got an engine from the Hercules people.
Right.
Which Hercules also built an industrial version.
Okay.
The industrial gasoline version was 130 horse.
Interesting.
And so that's the engine he wanted, so he got it.
130 horse at 130
3,400 RPM.
3,400 RPM.
Wow, so it turned
High
some
RPM
RPMs.
in the right out of the box. So Lloyd put that tractor together. He ran a 4-barrel carburetor with a Morphodite. We still got the old turbo. It's up on the shelf out there just because it's so unique, off of a Mack truck. And he pulled it a few years, even pulled it at Louisville.
Right.
In its early stages, early 70s. And Dad bought the tractor from him. We had a good relationship with Lloyd. Then years later, we bought most of his other Cockshutt tractors.
Okay.
But so that's kind of the start of the Levee Leaper.
What'd you guys farm with when you first started pulling?
Well, we used the 40 quite a bit.
Biggest tractor was that old one.
At 8. Well, when you very first started, you did use the F20, but then when we actually pulling, you were still probably using the 1850 Oliver, was one of your bigger tractors.
Forgot about it.
And 1030 case.
Okay.
You bought a 1030 case new, a JI case 1030.
So the reason I ask, sometimes people are real brand loyal. You know, I mean, and others aren't so much, and then later they end up with a brand because the dealers where they're at, because a lot of the dealer networks have changed.
That was kind of, there was an Oliver dealer in Shelbyville, which is about 14 miles away.
Right.
And there was a JI case dealership in Shelbina.
Yes.
And there was also a John Deere dealership in Shelbina.
Okay.
But
in Alice dealer.
Oh, and there was Alice Chalmers, and there was an IH. I mean, believe that or not, a town of about 2,000 people. There were 4 different brands of tractors.
But that was pretty common back in the day, because you'd have a small.
Shelbina had a lot of automobile dealers too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had at least 3 cars.
So the Cockshutt just kind of developed out of accident almost.
Yeah.
And you kind of had a dealer close for parts and things like that. So.
But yeah, slowly we drifted away. Basically, the Cockshutts became our hay tractors.
Right.
You know, of course, there's a unique story to Cockshutt as well, itself as a company. I mean, they had some innovative designs. They had the first live hydraulics.
Yep.
They had the first live PTO.
6-cylinder diesel.
6-cylinder,
There's a lot of advancements, and I don't know where Oliver and Cockshutt.
Well, what happened there? That's a unique story.
That's a deal and a half.
Cockshutt was a family company, and there were 5 brothers that were in control of the company. And they decided in about 67 or 8, somewhere in there, they were going to go public, and they sold shares. And so they sold shares out to the public at 49% of the company.
Right.
And one gentleman, I do not know his name, Dad probably doesn't remember it either. Dad has, by the way, met some of the original Cockshutt family.
Somebody is. Who got a hold of us because we had a Cockshutt in the
Well, that's Andy Applefeller from out in Ohio. Had you
how
come
do you
to
know us?
Well, just from pulling. He'd seen us. He'd seen us at different events.
Yeah.
But anyway, these 5 brothers, they sold 49% of the company out. They have their first shareholders meeting. They setting up in a hall somewhere. Right. And it gets to be 10, 15 minutes, and before start time, no one's arriving. There's no one showing up. And these guys are like, what's going on? There was someone to miscommunicate. Is the time off?
Right.
Or what's happened here? Well, just 5 minutes before start time, a gentleman comes walking in with a briefcase, comes right up to the head table of the 5 brothers, and he says, hello, gentlemen, I'm so-and-so, and I own 49% of your company. And they were shocked. This guy had searched them all out, bought everyone out, and owned 49%. And he said, and I'm going to sell my share to Oliver. That's how
I did not realize that's what happened.
That's a hostile takeover. But anyway, so that's when the merger started. And that's why a lot of people have said over the years, we would be often an announcer and say, here's one of those Canadian Olivers. Well, they weren't.
Right.
Really. What Oliver did then was paint a lot of the Oliver tractors with the Cockshutt color scheme.
Right.
Some had the yellow hoods and the red frames, and some were solid red, but they were trying to bring that Cockshutt clientele into the Oliver fold by leaving that name on there.
But
the thing about them, you can look at them and see similarities.
Right.
Was that some of the design engineers worked on both tractors prior to the merge.
So there was a relationship.
But it was,
sorts.
and that kind of happens today. I know there was a Funk or someone who designed most of the power shifts, like in your Magnum cases and in the John Deere early 55 series, those that multi 15 or 18 speeds. Yeah. That was one man's concept, and then and it was kind of the same thing.
He wasn't going to leave the money on the table. If he could sell it to both manufacturers, he would. So
right.
Certainly.
Another unique thing about the 500 series Cockshutt, the sheet metal design.
Yes.
The same designer designed that sheet metal on those 570s, 500 series that designed the sheet metal of the space shuttle.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Yeah. So I'm sure it was in his early days when he did the Cockshutt tractor. But through his career, he was the designer who designed the space shuttle.
That's interesting.
He had more tractors yet.
Yeah, but
they bought out Minneapolis.
Well, yes. I mean, Oliver, when it had merged, it finally became White Farm Equipment.
Right. And then it's continued.
Now it's
AGCO.
AGCO.
It's at. To me, it's disappointing to see what's happened to the whole ag industry with all of it. When you look back at the monopoly that International had on the industry in itself, and of course then that ended up switching almost to where Deere took that role, and you ended up with all of that changed. But there's still a lot of color loyalty. But the thing that was always unique that I'm finding out is that International and John Deere both got behind the tractor pullers. Mm-hmm. So with you guys being one of the few Cockshutts, did you guys get some support through Oliver and some of those at any point, or was that too late?
It was too late. We did get just a little help, kind of discount, through all these buyouts and purchases,
Right.
Hercules Engine Company was then purchased by White.
Right.
White Truck Company bought Oliver and all that and became the White Farm Equipment.
Right.
So Hercules was purchased by White. And so then there was a connection there with
Right.
the engines and the tractors. And there was a large White engines distributor dealership in St. Louis.
Okay.
And we kind of figured that out, and we could get a few engine parts at a slight discount.
Okay.
You know, but there's never, you know, we never got any real help because
Right.
we're just kind of out
You were
here
just
with.
getting some.
Yeah.
So when you started pulling the 40, what class? How did they do that? Was there a weight class back then, or you just kind of rolled in off the farm and
Oh, yeah.
hooked to the sled the way you went?
kind of the same.
Yeah.
Well,
It was about 5,500 pounds, I believe.
So they would still weigh them somewhat.
Yeah.
And then when you went to so the 50 never really got pulled.
Oh, no, it didn't. Well, it did in a way. So here we had this engine started.
Okay.
And the tractor stripped down and ready to go. EW and I, my brother, it was somewhere we were high school age.
Right.
We decided to go ahead, you know, Dad was, well, we took turns, but it was a team. We helped with the 570, but we're thinking, here sets this 50.
Let's put it together.
We need to go ahead and finish this. I mean, you know, what are we going to do with it?
Right.
So we finished it, but we took it off of, we didn't build it diesel. We went ahead and put it, because we were, you know, familiar with the gas version of the 570 and all that.
Right.
We're like, well, we're going to stick with gas. So we built it naturally aspirated. There were still a lot of brush pulls going on.
Right.
Non-sanctioned events. And so we built it naturally aspirated. We left the diesel pistons in it. I think we turned the tops down a little bit. So it was still high compression.
Yeah.
But putting the gasoline head on it, of course, lowered that some. And we ran it we found a big updraft off of something. I don't know, a big industrial engine, had a great big throat. Put a big updraft on it and pulled it some that away.
I don't remember that carburetor.
Yeah, and then, well, I think it may have been the one that was actually on. That leads into another whole story on the 570. I'll finish on the 50.
Yep.
We actually did. Then we took that updraft off and ran a 4-barrel
Right.
carburetor. I built an intake, kind of had a box that had runners going into the head. And so then I just adapted the top and put a 4-barrel on there. And it ran pretty good. Our cam was ground maybe for a little too high RPMs. Its torque range, it would scream for a while.
But then when it got
down to the end, the last little, she just couldn't hack it.
Right.
But we pulled that just maybe 1 or 2 seasons because we were focused was on the 570, and we wound up selling that stuff off.
What was that tractor called?
We didn't even name it.
Okay.
Because it was just brush pulling.
So even the 40 was a gas.
It was a diesel.
That was a diesel
With
and then
Perkins,
with
yeah.
With the Perkins and a turbo, and
Yeah.
then the 570 was a diesel in the beginning.
In the beginning, but Lloyd had put this gasoline industrial version of the Hercules in it.
Okay.
And the big difference in their horsepower in the gas tractor and the diesel tractor was the industrial engine had a cross-flow 12-port head.
Okay.
And that was probably our advantage for a long time in that class, was having that head.
Or another head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like it we're using.
Yeah, we're still running.
Oh,
we're
really?
still running that head on the engine
So
today.
that was a question I was going to get to later, but you're still running that same motor and
Basically, yes.
head. Just
Yeah.
putting a lot more air and
Right.
fuel, but you're in alcohol now. as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
So that 570 ran on gasoline pretty well.
Up until about 79,
Okay.
we put. It may have been a little before that.
Because you were one of the early alcohol tractors.
Yeah, it may have been 77 or 8, somewhere in there. Dad there were a couple Minneapolis Molines from in the Quincy, Illinois area,
Yes.
which that's only about 45, 50 miles from here. And we would see those guys.
Right.
And they had hooked up with Denny Happ from
Okay.
over in Illinois. And so Dad saw their systems and said, that's what we're going to have to do. And basically it was a Hilburn single butterfly injection system, and it was the nozzles fed right there behind the throttle body, went through the turbo and into the
Denny
system. But Denny helped him get set up with that.
He was working in boats or race cars, one or the other.
He was doing a lot of race car stuff and some boats. He's over on the river over there, and so, but if he got his tractor pullers started.
His system still wouldn't get the fuel right.
No, we couldn't get enough through it. But
well, you guys were probably trying to push more air. Was that engine in the 570 always had like a turbo or something on it, or was it naturally aspirated to start with?
Well, that's a story too. Before we went alcohol, we ran the 4-barrel carburetor.
Okay.
And someone had discovered that you could boost feed a water alcohol mix and place a nozzle right below the 4-barrel carburetor. And so as the boost got up, say 35, 40 pounds, it'd start pushing. Well, it'd probably start before that. But when you really needed a little more fuel, you would run a boost line from your intake manifold to a pressure tank, and that tank would then feed water alcohol injection in below the 4-barrel and get you some, more fuel. Extra. And it would cool that charge a little bit with the alcohol and the water in there. But before that even, we, with all these brush pulls, like I said earlier, there was a little town, everybody had a pull. Well, they would have these blower, non-blower, and hot rod class. So Dad figured it out. He said, well, we could be running the non-blower class too.
Right.
And so we had a quick change system. We would take the turbo and 4-barrel off.
Right.
And slap an updraft on it. And we would run, and in those days, there were several pulls that we pulled in the 5500 non-blower.
Right.
We'd put the turbo carburetor system on it, run the 55 blower class. We'd run the 7500 non-blower, the 7500 blower, and a few times we even ran the 9500 non and blower. I mean,
so you were
in the same night.
Yeah. So how quick could you put that switch?
Oh, we could have it switched in 5 minutes. It would all be off, ready to go.
Right.
One of us, probably me half the time, would be slinging weights.
Right.
And Dad would be getting the turbo and the 4-barrel off, and EW would be doing something else.
Right.
I mean, we had it done and ready for the next class.
That's
and of course, after a while, everything's super hot.
Right.
And so he had welder gloves, is how he took all the exhaust stuff off right quick. And I look back and I think, well, it was a lot of fun. We won a lot of trophies or ribbons and some prize. It actually, we were doing pretty well with the prize money.
Well, that's a whole other story.
I bet people got almost like, it's them again, So how many times are they going to hook tonight,
So Ivan, what was some of the early prize money? Do you remember what the purse was on some of those?
Oh my!
Gosh, some of them down to $100
or less.
Or less.
Yeah, I think if some of them was just trophy.
But it seems like in about the 80s, we don't always get that much more prize money now than you did back then.
No,
it's kind of it's almost sad. And then the other question I have for you, Ivan, is when did these boys talk you out of the seat?
It never did.
They never did?
No, we didn't.
So they worked on it a lot and you drove it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He was the driving force behind it. We all shared duties, but as far as driving, about every other time he was in the seat, once we got able to. And
he's getting tired of loading weights.
Yeah, so
those 4 classes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we finally just, eventually we focused and say through the 90s, we ran the 5 and the 7.
Right.
I mean, and then eventually this organizations decided, this is just making these events too long. And,
right.
And these guys, and it started getting tough there when you only had 1 hook.
Right.
Per night, go 1 class. We're like, whoa, this is, man, that's going to put the squeeze on us.
Right.
But and because we were even up into the 90s, we were still competitive in the 7500.
Okay.
Now the bigger engines would definitely work on us, but we, consistency, being able to weight it and drive it.
Right.
You could place. You might not win,
right.
but we could come home with a check.
But you were running 2 classes at that point, right?
Yeah.
The 5,000 or 55.
55 and the 50.
Yeah.
75, excuse me. But
we'd run. Oh gosh, I forgot one of them. Anyway.
But I got a question while you're thinking about that. So you remember Ernie Ropp probably and pulled with him some.
Who?
Ernie Ropp.
Oh yeah. No, he in a different class.
well, in the early days, before they got down in 75, I mean, we'd seen them events.
Right.
They were running primarily 95, and then they finally did build the tractor, got it down in 75, and then we had to butt heads with them.
Yeah.
But
because the Alice.
oh, they were good fun. I knew Warren real well. We traveled and NTPA things together and visited.
Yeah. So no, because they had the Alice. I think they were always then 9,000, and of course Warren's got some good stories on his show about.
Yeah.
His dad waking him up saying it's time to lose weight on the tractor.
Yeah.
And they went to work taking things off. Yeah. And then, of course, they ended up at the John Deere and ended up in your class. And Warren ended up winning a 7,500, I think, in '86. But you guys won some NTPA championships as well, right?
We never won a Grand National title, but we did have some regional wins. I mean, there were events that, NTPA had structured and set up that were regional.
Right.
We won some titles there. And of course, we ran quite a bit with the outlaw truck and tractor pullers as well through the early 2000s and, late 90s. And I'm pretty certain they had a thing where they had 4 or 5 state fairs, outlaw.
Right.
And, depending, your placement, they had something called a state fair sweep.
Okay.
They may still do that, but we don't get to run with outlaw as much as we used to. 3 times, he won the state fair sweep, and you had to win, or it was a point system similar to the seasonal point system.
But it was just for the state fairs.
Just for those state fairs.
Right.
And there was a bonus. I can't remember if it was maybe $1,000 bonus or something like that.
Pretty good money.
Yeah. And he won that 3 times.
Oh, wow.
The state fair sweep, which was
so when the big money was on the line, you knew how to get the job done. It's always fun to kind of win those, when they're like
those little special things,
And some organizations still try to put things like that together, but
we traveled all over the Midwest. I mean, we just couldn't make that Grand National circuit work. Just too much time away.
Right.
And Dad's been nicknamed by some of the folks that's worked for us. They called him Driving Ivan. So
I think now that you say that, I remember that nickname following you. George Henderson, I think, used to
probably
call you that.
But it started from his work ethic, not driving the tractor, actually.
Right.
I think some of the guys that worked around here called him, well, he's just driving Ivan, but that work ethic, unfortunately, spills over into pulling.
Right.
In a lot of good ways, but then we never spent time or as much time as a lot of pullers. Man, we got done, load that thing up, we got to get back, we got work to do tomorrow. And we might be 3 or 4 hours from home.
Right.
Load back up and back home again.
Yeah.
Back to the job. But
well, it's easy to do. I tend to do the same thing, and yet I realize some of the guys hang out overnight and go to the next one the next day.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm like, well, I'm getting older. I need to enjoy this a little bit. So, How many years did you drive the tractor? From the time you got on the first 40 till the last time you got off?
Well, when I got on the 2010.
Pulling 2020. Oh, we did pull a little 2020 John Deere for just a little bit in like a 4,500 class.
Didn't do anything.
That we just played with that a couple of times, but we were still running the 40. He's actually, of course, we haven't talked about the other tractor my brother and I built in about 2010.
Well, we can get into that maybe.
We can later
with him.
But anyway, he drove it at 85.
Okay.
The Levee Leaper was broke down, and we knew there'd be a pretty good crowd of folks. There's a local pull over here at Palmyra, and we've got a few fans and followers, friends and whatever that like to see how we're doing. And we knew there'd be several of those at that Palmyra event. And so we put him in the seat of the Savage tractor, which we built later. And because the Leaper was broken at that time. And he won that event. And that was pretty exciting at 85 to go out the gate and do about 331, and everybody else is back away.
That was be a lot of fun.
That was a highlight for us. I don't know if it's a highlight for him because he's won so many events that it was just another win maybe. But
you enjoyed that one though, probably didn't you? I was going to say something different. So how old were you when you started pulling?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
He'd been pretty young because he got married at 23. So
your kids would
he'd have been in his 30s.
30s, so a good 50 plus years. He would have been pulling tractors. Huh. Well, that's a good feat. It's a good feat. I don't think I'm going to make it 50 years until I just started. Well, I pulled some farm tractors back in the day, but
one interesting fact, I had a fan of somebody that kind of keeps up. We've got, you'll bump into people out at these different events, and they're always come around to the trailer and how you guys doing, and then you get to know them. I mean, And I don't remember what event we were at, and this gentleman said, he said, Ivan, I believe this tractor's the longest running super stock probably in the country. And I got to thinking about that. And I'm like,
I wouldn't.
It might be. I mean, of the same owner.
Some of them may have
that's
changed.
Still competing with the same tractor.
Yeah, because when I came down, I wasn't sure that I'd walk in the shop and see that tractor.
Yeah.
Because I can vividly see myself in the stands in Kelowna. And when you went alcohol in the beginning, that was a little tough to get it spooled sometimes, if I remember right. And I feel like one night you guys came up there and couldn't get it off the line.
That's very possible.
And it just, you felt bad for you guys because you drove all the way up there, and you couldn't get it to spool up. And so, but anymore they're a lot more consistent.
Oh yeah.
What's the story behind the Levee Leaper? I mean, you're down here on flat bottom ground. Is it just?
Actually, my sister came up with that name. Of course, we live on the Salt River. And we just trying to think of something catchy. There weren't any wild rides or accidents in the river bottom or anything, like somebody saw Ivan shooting over a levee, nothing like that. It was a catchy name. We've got several miles of levee along this Salt River.
Gosh, we never said nothing about that wreck we had in.
There's a lot of things we could talk about. He may talk about some highlights, but that's how the name came about. Because we have levees along the Salt River.
And I kind of remember that a little bit. In my mind, and of course when you're young, you remember certain things and they're much bigger than sometimes when you get older. But George Henderson had a way of announcing that could just keep a crowd captivated. And he had a story for each one. And I just remember talking about levees and that, but I thought maybe there was some unique story that came out of that you named it. And it could be that George made one up too. He wasn't short of making sure the crowd was captivated.
He was good.
Yeah, he did a great job. So when you started pulling, let's get into some of the stories. Were there any accidents, any crazy things that happened early on?
Yeah, there was an accident where the sled didn't work right and we went south fast.
You got unhooked?
No.
Oh.
The sled
The brakes actually it came out of gear or was not in gear. Operator something we don't know there, but then the tandems had no brakes.
Oh,
The air was off, the down or something, and of course we had just we'd been running like a road gear,
right.
for quite a few years, and he finally had some gears made, and so it sped it up. We didn't know, we hadn't really been out but once or twice, and so he's got the new gears in, tractor's running great, he launches, takes off, and thinks, wow, this is working. And so at like 270 feet or so, he's like, I'm going way too fast.
Right. They're not pulling you down.
No, so he lets out of it. And of course, back in the day, a lot of the fairgrounds and the events, cattle panels.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And, no barriers, no guardrails. And it was a fairgrounds that was bordered to school grounds in Hawk Point, Missouri, outside St. Louis a ways in the Troy area. Well, anyway, he realizes that about 270, they're not stopping me. So he backs out of the throttle, sled comes up, shoves him, and he knows he can't stop. So then he hits the brakes because he looks ahead, and the shutdown area is cattle panels in a semicircle full of people, spectators.
Oh, no, yep.
Lawn chairs, coolers, people sitting on blankets, the whole thing, because here was this grass area that went into the school grounds, and he just blew through those cattle panels from the sled and all. And of course,
it's one thing to stop a tractor, it's a whole nother, you got the weight of the sled behind you.
When I went out the gate, we was going fast enough, we ran over coolers and jackets, and only one guy got hurt a little bit. That was on a jungle gym, and the sled hit that jungle gym, knocked half a dozen of them off of there, and he's the only one that got hurt a little, and he said, oh, that ain't bad, just forget it.
So they were playground equipment.
Yeah, it went on through and hit a jungle gym playground thing that they were up on watching the event,
Right.
And he just couldn't get off quick enough, and it knocked him off. But it didn't really tear. I mean, that was at the stop point. The tractor just kind of dented one of the bars, And,
oh my goodness.
But he was scared to death, because it just all stopped. He finally his
brake. You're thinking there's people laying everywhere.
Yeah. He said, I looked down. He said, and there laid a sweater and a smashed cooler and a lawn chair here and there, and just thought the worst.
Yeah.
But everyone got out of the way.
Wow, that's incredible. I've seen hitches break where the tractor broke loose, or something had let go. But my gosh, if you had the weight of the sled.
You were on 570, yeah.
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 That's scary to get on it the next time?
No, I thought about it a little bit.
It's too much fun. You figure they fixed the problem, right? What are some others that you had, maybe when you were driving, or was that the main big one?
Oh, well, some of the trips could turn into...
Jerked the hitch out of the 570. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's another one with the tractor. That's another story. It was at Troy, which was one of probably the good events, state level events in Missouri. I mean, 2 tracks.
Tractors, the sled, the dirt wasn't right because
it was inconsistent. That night, the track was real inconsistent. There'd be a hard, dry place and then a wet spot. And it might be, just halfway across. So you couldn't pick a good groove. There was not a real good groove. And we had just went to the HP tires.
Okay.
There's a story behind that as well. But we had just put on the HPs and didn't know what kind of pressures to run, didn't really know how to weight it. We've tried a lot more traction with them. And got into one of those inconsistent spots, and one tire came loose, and that put all of it on the other, And so we kind of tried to tap the brake a little bit, and then it come around, and then this one's in some good dirt, and this one's out, and the tractor just got crazy. Really crazy. And of course the light super's always kind of been known for that, especially the ag chassis light supers.
It went a lot like that.
Yeah. Front end was off the ground, and
it's rocking on the back wheels.
Yeah, and finally, he just had to shut down, and it literally, of course, on the back of the Cockshutt, you can build a pretty stout hitch because of all the access, the bolt area. You can put a big flat plate and build it, but all that jerking, and it busted that out of the cast, some of it. And it was quite a topic on pulloff.com for a while. All these ag chassis tractors, they just need to be eliminated. These things are going to kill somebody, and that type of thing, know. And the organizations then decided let's just tie these hitch areas more into like the tie bars and the frames, so the cast isn't taking all the load. But we learned too, that was an experience, okay, we're gonna have to change the air pressure a little bit and learn how to work with these HP tires on these light tractors. What we were running, we went from a 10-ply tire to the HPs, and the HP...
And that was a tire, just for the audience to know, was a tire designed for tractor pulling.
Correct, just
so your
strictly.
Air pressure was probably completely different because the sidewall ply was, I don't know.
That was the big difference between the sidewalls.
So it would lay out flat and get bigger surface area.
And, your prior design tires had actual lugs, tractor lugs, and these... they had pre-made kind of grooves, bars,
double
but not
cut.
They're already. And out here at the outside, at the sidewall, where the sidewall begins from the tread, it's solid rubber. There's probably 4 inches of rubber that squares that tire up. Well, that doesn't give.
No.
And so it would, when the tractor wanted to lean, it pushed that hard biting tire, made it grip,
and then it would bite.
And so then it goes over and goes to the other one, And you see a lot of the guys now, they'll shape those down,
where they're not quite
as aggressive.
The way to adjust it is more with air pressure.
Yeah, a lot of it.
So interesting. But the hitch, then you were able to rebuild. It's not like it tore it loose and the tractor.
No, it just kind of tweaked and bent. And
is that as close as you came to dumping one over?
Yeah, let's see.
I think so.
There was one more time somewhere.
Not one as wild as that one.
And then, was that in the days that you had a roll cage, or you didn't have a roll cage? Yeah. That was, were you around, so when you started, there was no roll cage. In fact, you had fenders on that 570?
Yeah, it had fenders from the beginning.
Okay.
Now, the 040, I don't know if he ran fenders on it, but of course the ground speed.
Wasn't that big. I just know that eventually came. A lot of safety things have changed over the years, and you feel pretty safe strapping into them now just because of the safety harness and the roll cage. And
there have been several get over on their side, and
they still can.
The cages do their job.
Yeah, they do. It's the thing I see in some of the light supers. We're seeing some tractors still break on the ag chassis, but it's typically almost self-inflicted because they're cutting so much material out. And so, which brings me back to another point. How early did you guys start working with the casting on this 570?
Well, the first, that would have been about 79, 78, 79. The chassis on Oliver's, Cockshutts, Massey Harris's, they called them a bathtub. It was a big cast frame that bolted to the transmission or rear end housing. And, unbelievable amount of weight and mass up there. And some of them would break just because of this extra force from pulling. without any machining or anything done to them. And they were maybe somewhat at a weight disadvantage with, a 300 and some pound chunk, plus this in between up front, and I suppose the combination of the weight disadvantage and the possibility of breakage, NTPA at that time was basically the only organization that was governing body, coming up with really good safety rules. They determined that it would probably be safer to eliminate that at the back of the block and build steel, aluminum, a metal frame that couldn't break. Of course, then you get into manufacturing capabilities and guys that can fabricate, and some of them you're like, well, they might have been better off with the cast iron on there.
Yeah, that happens.
But so that'd been in the late 70s. We actually, his first attempt was he just took there's a really heavy cast area in the front of a Cockshutt. He took that off and built a steel
weight bracket
and front end and built an axle. And
lost a lot of weight that way, I'm sure. Yeah. And I think it was in the 80s they started going to tie bars at some point. Might have been actually the late 80s, but that was just tractors in general, a lot of stress there, trying to tie all that together.
Oh yeah.
The hitches. Any other stories you can think of, Ivan, that you want to share or anything?
I can't think of it.
Okay.
Did you look at your paper?
Oh yeah, I made a few notes, but
if there's stories you want to share with Ivan, let's share them now.
Yeah,
we might move on out to the shop in front of the tractor.
Pretty much, I think.
Got those, okay.
Well, now in the 70s, once he really got, hooked. We started going to more. We got into the sanctioned events, and. I'm trying to think, he's probably pulled in, I think around 16 states.
Okay, yes.
Traveled a lot.
Been from Florida to Minnesota.
Yeah, he's been from Florida to Minnesota.
So you pulled in Florida.
Oh yeah.
That's interesting. That state actually has quite a bit of tractor pulling in it.
He went early to a few, and then it kind of died off for a while. It wasn't a lot of notoriety about those events down there.
They're just starting to market those better in the last couple of years. So do you know how many hooks you made throughout your career? Any way to know?
It would be thousands.
Yeah. It's just interesting. It would be interesting to know. I don't know if there's any way to calculate that. But
somewhere there in the
rough area,
the late 70s, early 80s, he pulled in the Astrodome down in Houston.
Okay.
TNT Motorsports were just kind of getting off the ground and trying to get events, and they wanted some farm type tractors, but they wanted alcohols because they didn't want to have to rent the smoke machine.
Right.
And he pulled down there. I don't think there were too many made it. Maybe a half a dozen guys went and hooked. But
say a story come to mind.
Yeah.
And that's yours when you tractor would run that grass in it.
Oh my! Yeah, we were pretty competitive there for a while in the mid '90s. We ran against the Grand National.
That's all I got on my mind.
Yeah.
The head is 12 ports.
Yeah.
I remember. And that's the only tractor that had that.
Yeah.
And
in a cast iron.
It seems to me like the smaller engine can keep up with the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
We did a good job keeping track of them. And I wondered, how come? Was that port head?
Yeah.
Well, you could as long as you get the air and the fuel through it, that's what it is. It's just an air pump. So.
But he brought up something. We were pretty competitive, winning a lot of events and state fairs all around through the 90s. I went out to, I'm not bad mouthing the state just happened to be, went out to Kansas, to the Kansas State Fair all by myself, and 2 or 3 other pullers from Missouri. We all went out together. And I ran the 5.
Okay.
And I was I do not remember how I placed. It was either first or second.
Okay.
And then they had a break in the session, And we got all of us, we got our rigs all ready, weighted up, fueled up, ready to roll for the night session where we're going to run the 7,500. And our crew, we went out to like a beef house out on the fairgrounds and had steaks, came back. We're thinking everything's ready to roll here, and so they're staging the 7,500 after maybe a 72 mod or something, and we're getting ready to hook, and they get in the order and they call my name, Dean Carroll on deck or whatever, they said, and tractor wouldn't fire. I mean, I fired it up, ran about 10 feet, just died. I'm like, what? This thing, it made awesome.
All the time.
Yeah, what's wrong? And had somebody, I tried, whirled, nothing. Had somebody, I said, get over, somebody come and pull started me. Nothing. So I'm like, it is not getting fuel.
Right.
How can it not be getting fuel? So I'm like, I just don't understand. I took it apart right behind or after the filter.
Right.
Just like drips came out. And at that time we were still running like a Hilburn. They were a stacked disc filter.
Okay.
And so I crack it open, take it apart, and just sand and grit and grass chiblings came out of it. And I'm like, seriously, how did that get in there? And so I run up and open the lid on the tank and look in, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And there was just stuff floating around in there.
Somebody put something in.
Oh yeah. I was like, you've got to be kidding. I've been sabotaged. So I told him, I said, drop me to last. If you can, drop me 6, whatever. I said, I'm going to pull. So I flushed everything through. Didn't want to waste all my alcohol for that pass, but drained it, flushed it, tried cleaning my filter, and they're calling my name again. I'm like, okay, forget it. I just pitched the filter stuff on the trailer, flushed it again, put it back together with no filter. Probably crazy, but I was aggravated.
Right.
And
you came that far, you're going to.
That's right. And I wound up getting second in the 7. And there was a diesel John Deere beat me 5-6 feet. Bizarre thing was, they unhook me. I'm driving off the track and I go to turn to head back to the infield and the steering wheel just goes like this. I'm like, oh, what's happened now? And I hop off, and I'm looking at my steering shaft and there was a bolt just gone down right at the rack and pinion. The bolt was gone.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, okay, I don't think, because it had a lock nut on it.
Right.
I'm like, that didn't just fall out. And I'm like, somebody just didn't want me in Kansas. And that's the only time we ever really had anything crazy like that happen.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because I'm driving down, I'm just thinking of all the stories that I've heard from different pullers. Mm-hmm. And I'd never heard of one, and I just thought, I wonder if somebody ever got sabotaged. Well, here we are. Here I am an hour or two later hearing about it.
But, of his 50 plus years of pulling, that's the only time we questioned anything. Yeah. It could have been a little kid.
Right, it could have been, but that's pretty unlikely.
I give you the benefit of the doubt. But anyway.
Well, Ivan, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us.
I'm glad.
I just want to do justice and record some of these stories of you, what you did. I would imagine you were one of the first that kind of maybe went big time in this area, I would imagine, that really traveled a lot. I know
Connor brothers.
Yeah, they're not too far from us. Brian and Ernie Connor.
Yeah. I should have planned a little better and organized something with them right away.
He started pulling against their dad, Rayburn, back in the 60s,
so,
late 60s. So
yeah,
Massey 44
is what he.
Or 101. I believe it was 101.
Okay.
Massey.
Yeah.
Right, and so there's just a ton of history. It's just I will honestly say I did not follow you guys close enough. Mm-hmm. Because I guess I was preoccupied, or I don't know what the reason was. I just didn't expect to walk in and see that Cockshutt look like it did 30 years ago. And I'm sure a lot of things changed under the sheet metal.
Oh, yeah.
But well, thank you, Ivan. It's good to see you. doing well and in good spirits, and it was great to meet your wife. And how many years have you been married? We were arguing about that earlier.
Yeah, you're taxing him now.
62?
66.
66 years. That's a pretty good feat. And you raised some good kids out of the whole deal too, didn't you?
Well, a good bunch, good bunch.
Yeah, it looks like it. So, well, thanks a lot. We're going to break down, and then we'll move out to the shop and go from there. So,
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So we're back here again on another part, I guess, or part 2 here with the breaking barriers. And EW joined us, and we're out here in front of the Levee Leaper. So some of the stories we heard earlier, obviously, was what your dad started, but then eventually you guys kind of took on and you got into another tractor. Tell us a little bit about all that. And who got into the jockeying of who gets to drive? And
I don't know how we determine that. It's just kind of discussion with each other about, well, are you going to drive tonight, or are you going to drive tonight? And a lot of it became like who could actually go, who had time.
Right.
I mean, at the time when Dad started pulling, the farming operation was, it was fledgling. They were beginning it, and they were, and so you just eventually grow.
Right.
Family members come along. Well, pretty soon, we just can't all go to the events anyway because of we don't have room in the vehicles unless we take multiples. And so much going on here with the business that we couldn't all be gone every time. But so there's not a lot of struggle. It just kind of fell together who was going to drive that night. His son probably drove quite a bit for a few years. I mean, my kids are younger than his, and so I was kind of home watching kids and farming, and so his son got to drive quite a bit, Chad, and but back when we started driving, of course I was a year and a half, 2 years in school behind him, but I had to do everything he did.
Right.
So
we know how that works.
So I really wanted to do whatever he was doing, and so Dad let me start probably a little earlier than some kids did. I think I was 13 when I pulled at the local fair first.
So the Levee Leaper's been around for years and years. What happened with the next one then?
Well, that came along just because the class morphed into, they kept getting, these ag chassis tractors, they kept lightening them down, and it was run what you brung.
Right.
And I don't think there was even a cubic inch limit. And when that started, some of the guys got the 4010s down into the 5500 Super.
Yep.
That's 640 cubes, and easy 500. They were a little over 500, 540s. Yeah. And so here we are.
They were putting in the 466 motors.
And boring them big and here we are at 340 in a little compact industrial motor that has no room for growth.
Right.
And we were able to hang on for several years. That was how the HP tires came along.
Okay.
We were light enough that we could put those heavy tires on, and the big tractors couldn't.
Right.
So that was our one step at trying to run against these bigger engines. But eventually, you're kind of up against a wall, cubic inch is cubic inch.
It is.
So we're like, well, gosh, we want to stay with Cockshutt, but that's the biggest motor what about the Oliver Cockshutts?
Okay.
So we knew of some pullers up in Wisconsin, the Trinnery brothers, that had attempted to pull diesel and kind of got it built and got it going with a 2050 Oliver. And I think just life changed for them. They started having little kids and stuff, and there was too much money going into this tractor. And so they put it up for sale, and we bought it kind of, unfinished, whatever, and sold off of, whatever diesel stuff we didn't need. And we put spark plugs in the diesel head and built a 504 engine for the class.
Alcohol, right?
It was on alcohol right off the beginning. And
it's the large Hercules engine.
Yeah, it's a larger version of the Hercules. And
478.
now, they have some design flaws as far as pulling's concerned for us. The 478 Hercules block is just, it's kind of weak.
Right.
It's the castings, in around the main webbing and things are about a 1/4 inch thick.
Oh.
Compare that to a 466 International or John Deere. They're just a lot more meat.
Well, hey, you did make it out.
Colder here it is in the next room.
It is cold in here, but we wanted to,
Heater ain't running.
well, we're afraid to make too much noise.
Do we do that?
You think of something else to talk about?
You know, if you'd wanted to call home, tell her I'm available now.
You can go ahead.
We can do that.
When do you want to do that?
You don't have to leave. I mean, he can edit it out or something.
Yeah, I'll edit everything. Trust me, we'll spend hours doing that. We cut. Sometimes you'll wonder how they make it look good.
Yeah.
No.
It's about as far as I want to walk.
Yeah, I imagine. No, I went and put infrared heat.
Yes. You want to come get Dad? He's ready to come back, I guess.
Oh, okay.
And of course up there, then
You're
the
not
winter,
going to eat
the
that.
concrete gets cold.
Well, he just,
Shut the
we
heat
were
off.
doing the one out here in the shop, and he
About an
came
hour
out
later,
here.
we're all in there shaking.
Interrupted us, said he was ready to go.
Well, this room just doesn't get
So,
used.
yeah.
But
He was
occasional.
He was done in the house.
And we didn't have that on soon enough.
Yeah.
So,
But
Okay, I'll come get him.
we could have warmed it
okay,
up
bye.
Okay, bye.
a little more than we did. We just didn't know what would suit you the best as far as.
Oh, we'll be fine, so.
She's gonna come get you, so you may want to wait in the office for her to see her.
Yeah.
He has the cameras going behind you.
We'll get you another shot, right? So that's when you guys built the red Cockshutt.
Yes.
Okay. And how long did you guys pull that one?
Well, we've had it, I think since about 2010 or 11, somewhere right in there. Pretty successful with it, but the more horsepower we kept trying to make, we started having some block issues. I know we were at the Kansas City Farm Show, used to have indoor pools, and we just destroyed an engine down there. We were separated the block right above.
Right.
You've seen some tractors do that.
Yes.
Just boom, top half comes off.
In fact, were you one of the first to do that?
Well, I think
doubt it. No.
I think there was a D21
That might.
back probably 5 to 10 years ahead of us doing it, and theirs was due to valve train failure, and it captured all that pressure and.
Because I just had that come up on another episode, and that's when the cables started coming around the motor just to keep things from.
Well, yeah, we had cables.
You did.
I mean, it saved.
Yeah.
It saved ours.
Now you're probably girdled with the one behind us here now, and that can hold everything.
That's one thing too about this little 3400 engine in the Levee Leaper.
Okay.
Unbelievably strong bottom end.
Okay.
Really good casting. Super strong. We've never had to run a girdle on this engine.
Really?
No.
Interesting.
Now the 478 has to have one.
Right.
It just won't take it.
You guys still have that?
The 478, no, after 3 come aparts,
That was enough
or
of that.
4. Actually, one time it didn't lift the top half. I'd made a pass. I was first hook at an event. Made a decent pass. It was in the 290s.
Right.
I said, your sled's probably a little bit heavy.
Okay.
Depends on what kind of show you want. And I went back into the pits. They decided to reweight.
Right.
And I thought, oh man, now I got a hook again, you know. And
Right.
of course, we're all milling around the tractor, checking it out, putting fuel in, looking at this and that. Had the side shields off so it'd cool down a little. And my uncle, who's not around pulling hardly ever, but he is an engine kind of guy and works on semis and things like that. He's walking around looking at everything. Goes, Dean, is that oil supposed to be right there alongside that block?
It was cracking the block already.
It was trying to separate, but it didn't do it.
Because I think a lot of guys, if they're not running the Internationals or the John Deeres, they're starting to run Cummins quite a bit. I don't know if you see that or not. And I don't know, then you got to retrofit it into your frame.
There's a lot of these 570s in the South.
There are, okay.
That are putting the little Cummins in them. And of course it's an engine that's used in a lot of things.
It is, and there's a lot of performance stuff available for those Cummins too. At this point.
Yeah.
So there's a lot
because of the truck pullers. Yeah.
So it's really not a bad option. So what happened to the red Cockshutt?
Well,
what was the name of that?
It's still here, the Savage.
Oh, so you still have it?
We still have it.
We incorporated the Salt River there with Salt River Savage, kind of like, with the Leaper.
So you've got 3 right now?
Just two.
Just 2.
It's at a shop right now, having a guy doing some fabrication on the manifolding for me.
And you're still running then the original block?
No. We finally gave up the Ghost. We hated to. There were only, at one time, 5 large cube 478s running in the whole United States. So everybody had one off in Superstock. Everybody had one off stuff. None of us had ever put our heads together to try to do anything, There was one in Wisconsin.
Okay.
And and then eventually 2. You may have heard of John Hull. It would be Lyle Hull's nephew.
Okay.
Anyway, they bought a tractor that had a 478 in it.
Okay.
The other was Jeff Guza, I believe, from up and then there still is now Sean Peets. He's from over around St. Louis.
Okay.
Very competitive.
Yes.
He's using the 478.
Still using it.
And still using it. And Sean, I can't say enough good about that guy. I mean, he does 90% of his own work. And he has been able to keep the 478 together.
And figured out a way to...
He's had some breakage.
But
everyone else is
just
gave up. Said, okay, enough's enough. They build great power. We
just can't hold the block together.
No. I don't know what it is about. Maybe it's the head design. They are 12 port, but they're not cross flow. But they just build good power.
Well, and that's a set sitting right there.
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, they've got big valves too. Clearly, you can move a lot of air through, and that's the big thing with a lot of them older ones that you run into. They didn't have those big valves, and then you struggled trying to get enough flow through it. So
they run really hard. Sean's still competitive, and he's running with the guys with the Bamber heads and Indy heads, and then he's not.
And you guys are still running stock cast heads too.
Well, now we've finally.
And maybe you don't want to disclose your secrets.
Well, no, with the Savage, we finally went ahead and we said we just can't fight this anymore. And of course, with the ag chassis thing, you're allowed to use an engine that is used in that family brand. You know what I'm saying? So there's some gray area on. So I mean the Oliver Cockshutt being under the Agco family, it can run the 478. It can run a Cummins. It can run the DT series style, international style Detroit. So we just finally said, okay, we know that DT series has got an awesome block.
So
we're not going to split that one. And so that's what we stuck in it now.
And it works.
We're still ironing out some things with fuels not being quite right. We tried to build this engine. We thought, well, we're going to have a good aluminum head on it. Maybe we won't have to spend a lot of money on turbocharger system, whatever. So we've been trying the last couple of years running a single turbo. We about got it figured out. We don't know what we're going to do. I mean,
what class are you running in with that one now?
It's in the 6000 Extreme with Excalibur.
There's Extreme, and I'm not sure what those are like.
Basically, it's the Outlaw Ag Chassis Light Super.
That's what, ECI has the same thing, and there's a white and an Oliver that pull with us Zen Brothers. I don't know if you.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they're successful with it. And I don't know what motor they're running. They're both alcohol. Seems like, they work on one and perfect it, and then they work on the next one, and it kind of but they're always competitive.
They're good competitors. They've been to Missouri a couple of, maybe 3 times.
They may have.
But they had kind of started in that. They built kind of for that light limited single charger class in the beginning, didn't they?
They're still in the light limited super stock is what ECI calls it. I think Outlaws has a class for that. I think we're 6,500 on the diesel and 6,250 or something on the alcohol.
See, in this Extreme from Excalibur and the Outlaw, we're not limited to the single charger.
Okay, so
it's kind of you might call it classic light super, because we still run the ag chassis.
Yeah.
But you can run diesel or alcohol, and you can have multiple turbochargers.
And you got some 3010s and stuff on alcohol in that class, right?
Probably.
I think so, because I think there's one that what did he call that, a light super stock? And I think he's alcohol and running 3 turbos. So
very possible.
I think Kurt Paulson's doing that. So there's a lot of options with that one. I believe the ECI, the light limited super stock, I think you're down to 1 turbo.
Right, 3x4.
Yeah. So they're limiting them on that, and they kind of got it to where the diesels and the alcohols are pretty competitive. And I don't know where all they can interchange. Each series does it a little bit different. So, So you pretty much run both all the time now?
Both tractors.
Yeah.
We try to. And that was, we
kind of why we went back to 2 turbos on this one now.
When that light limited 3x4 single turbo came about, we thought, that's going to be the place for the Levee Leaper.
Right.
But there just weren't enough events that coincided. We had this 505 tractor built.
Right.
And you're thinking, well, we don't want to split them up and go different directions.
Right.
We'd like to take them both to the same event.
Exactly.
We did run with the 3x4.
Okay.
And had it built for light limited. We didn't actually change the engine as much as it should have been.
Okay.
It needed the compression raised. We stayed low compression, basically just put the single charger on the 2 charger motor, stage motor. It ran good, but we just couldn't stay right in there like we should. And so the events didn't start showing up.
Right.
So we're like, okay, we'll just go back to 2 chargers, stage it, and stay here and take them both to the same events.
So where do you guys still pulling some national stuff, or are you staying mostly Missouri, Southern Iowa?
Pretty much Missouri, Southern Iowa, Nebraska, Illinois. Occasionally, Illinois is classed, they changed to component in their light super.
Okay.
So we don't go over there a lot anymore. There's quite an advantage to a component chassis tractor. Yeah. But we, if there's an event that's close, which we do some along the river.
Right.
We go to those events.
And one thing that's changed from back when you guys were young, I'm starting to see these associations put on a lot of good events where within a couple hours, you can usually get about all the you need in the summer. Where it seemed like back in the early days, Iowa, Missouri, guys worked together a lot. Then they ended up going on the Grand National Series or the NTPA, and so that was always kind of spread it out a little bit. But what's your take on the sport of tractor pulling? If each of you would answer that, from where you've seen it to where it's at today. I don't care. Just have a little raw honesty with it. If there were eras you liked the best, things like that.
Well, of course, when you're super competitive like we were during the 90s,
right?
You can't beat that era.
Right.
I mean, we had a blast. We won a lot of events, traveled all over, met friends from all over the country.
Right.
That era was probably good. And during that time, there was this transition from run what you brung to trying to put some rules on.
Right.
Especially in our class. This light super has always been a real controversial place to be, because they were just kept bringing bringing bigger tractors
right.
down to the 55, 57,
Right.
6,000,
Shaving
you know, just shaving and shaving and shaving. And you're like, oh my gosh. I would have proposed at that time to have went with like a 410 cube.
And limit it.
And limit it.
Yep.
Maybe not hard limits, but a limit of 410 cubic inch. Because, you know, you look at these tractors here, they were your, you know, 560, 460 farm balls,
right.
4010s,
Right.
tractors that were maybe 4 plow, 5 bottom plow tractors. And they basically, during the 80s and 90s, it all just became hay tractors.
Right.
You know, and so all of a sudden, we're bringing down, you know, 1066s, basically, because of the ability to change rear ends and things like that, and bringing that 466 motor in on the Deers, and it just changed everything, and all of a sudden, the cubic inch thing became what won. You know, and
well, it's hard to replace it.
And the amount of light super guys, they just disappeared.
Right.
All those 465, 60 guys, the little tractors, little Alice's, they just went away.
Because they had to build a new tractor if they wanted to compete.
And
so
I think I would have.
Looking over the era the whole time, I mean, I missed out on that. I mean, I missed that era when we had all the variety.
Oh, yeah.
Because we had all the Mini and the ACs. And we had a lot of different variety in our class. And everything was different. Everyone had something different and unique. You know, the run what you brung type thing at first, but then it kind of progressed. But I mean, still, we all were competitive with different brands. You know, it was kind of a neat time. Where now it seems like it's either all red or all green. You know?
It is.
I miss the variation. You know,
and then if it's not, it's primarily getting down to the Cummins motor, unfortunately. So it's.
And it really went. It went from an era of uniqueness to what you have, you know, and then it went to cubic inch was winning it, and now it's went to dollars.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just whoever spends.
Kind of why I picked the class I'm in. It's somewhat limited. Fortunately, but unfortunately, figured out a way to get around that too.
Well, money can solve any problem. Yeah. You know, I mean, that's what happens. Is that
it can cause any problem and solve.
That's right. I mean, it's hard to do a limited class, and then not work towards who can buy the next version of a turbo, or who can buy the next best fuel injection pump, or those type of things. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's in all classes. But when you really put a limit on it, and everybody kind of gets all here together, then somebody's going to start forking it out, because I'm not taking second tonight. You know, I mean,
they're
that's
going to start figuring out tires. They're going to spend money on maybe different chassis setups. They're going to do.
I suppose
somewhere they're going to spend some money to get an edge.
The big difference, my take on the sport compared to, say, our kind of the heyday through the 80s and 90s is we were able to pretty much do 90% of our own work.
Right.
You know, you'd have a, you know, maybe you need to build your rear end. You'd take somebody and have them make you a billet spool or something like that. But technology is what's really changed the sport. I mean, I'm not against it. I love technology. But along with technology comes with that price tag. You know, I mean, these turbos now, like the little 3x4, that can build 70 pounds of boost. Well, on alcohol, and I don't know what they were trying to get out of the little 3x4s on the diesels, but I mean, and stay together, and the ability just to make that boost, you know, that's something else.
It really is. It's the thing is with the technology, we probably got more reliability for the most part. Other than this winter, of course, I went through some turbos, but last year another manufacturer went through turbos too, you know, because they're always pushing the limit, but you can actually take a motor and run it for a while. But I'm just sitting here looking around in your shop. You guys had to build it. I mean, that's the difference back then to today. And the thing I think that happened back then, even there was almost a little bit more support even from one competitor to another, because you didn't want to see them. You didn't want to beat them because they broke.
No.
Still wanted to outrun them. And if they got a rear end that's breaking or something, you know, what I'm seeing as I interview people, that there was a little bit more, we're going to come over here and help you, or try this to help keep your tractor together, you know.
Oh yeah, there was way more camaraderie. You might call it.
We built a lot of friendships. I mean, and you helped the guys out, and they helped us out. And
where now we have, you know, I feel like I still have I'm making a lot of friends. But, you know, we're not going to talk about air pressure. You're going to have to see what the tires on the back.
Yeah.
You're gonna, you know, it's just, but when you spend a certain amount of money, you want to get the benefit of it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's positive, negative. It's just, it's different. There's no going back to it. And I think it's just a fun era to listen to what a lot of you guys did with that. But any other stories you can think about that you want to share?
Oh, they're just.
There's a lot.
It's a lifetime of pulling, and it's hard to pick out something that, you know. I mean, we've not had any major issues traveling. Of course, Dad always wanted to just. Of course, when he's raised by parents who lived through the Depression.
Right.
And so
that's a different deal.
You know, so that becomes generational to a certain degree, you know. I mean, save money, don't throw that away. Don't do this, don't do, you know, I mean, and so our first trailer that we hauled the tractor on was a skimpy thing, and he didn't think a thing about it. You know, well, axle brakes, spring brakes, hitch brakes, you know, we'll fix it next time. Well, okay, but we've had some things like that. I know when he first started using a trailer, I think he had a 76 Dodge club cab pickup, and he had put a little extra bracing for the hitch, but basically it just broke the bumper off. And came home, you know, and it's like, I can't believe you made it, Dad. You know, it's like it was like hanging by a couple of brackets, you know. I mean, you learn as you go on all those things.
Right. No, we wouldn't even. Yeah.
No, and we just he had some, you know, instead of going buying a factory-built nice trailer somewhere, he found a welding shop somewhere close, and they built one, what he wanted, had a tail and ramps, and of course, he said, now I want that thing as light as, because I don't want to be dragging around 10,000 pounds.
Well, they pulled it behind a motorhome.
Oh, yeah, we went behind a lot, behind a motorhome. We were at the Purdue, it was an NTPA event out at Purdue University. And the whole family went along this time, or a big bunch of us, and we went in the motorhome. And he pulled, and of course, got to get back home. So we did spend the night because it's quite a ways out there. And
in the motorhome.
Yeah. So we get up. He gets up before the crack of dawn. I mean, it's dark, and he leaves. And of course, half of us are asleep. Anyway, and we're tooling down. It might have been Highway 36, which runs right through here. Anyway, wakes me up at about 7 with a huge kaboom, bang, you know, and I'm like, what was that? You know, I'm laying in the back bunk back there, and he looks in the mirror and he sees smoke coming off the trailer. Only broke a spring, hit a pothole and broke a spring.
Oh, God.
Sunday morning, 7 o'clock.
No way to fix it.
Out in the middle of Indiana. How do you fix it?
Yeah.
We didn't have a spare spring. Fortunately, a light had just came on at a farmstead right on the highway. And so he limps in there, tire squalling, and gets in. And this guy comes out and you know, tell him, well, we need some help, but we don't know what we're going to need. And got to looking at it, and it had just the top leaf right before, not too, you know, about 3 inches from the eyelet, where it just snapped it. Well, he said, I don't have any springs. And I said, do you have some scrap iron or anything around and a welder? Yeah, you can have whatever you need. So I built a box that would slip over the ends, put it back together, and came to Missouri.
Needless to say, we always had a spare spring from then on.
From then on, yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't get your axle above that.
Oh, it was. Well, I took that eyelet end loose, you know, and slipped it on there, and then maybe I can't remember how we jacked it. We got it together, but it survived. Of course, in the days prior to that, I remember he had about a 79 Dodge, and of course, for some reason, that particular engine, it was a 360,
Right.
which were decent engines.
Right.
But the one in this particular truck was a pup. It wouldn't pull anything. It was in the beginning of the smog era, and they had the stuff on their mission.
Geared high and whatnot. Yep.
So anyway, I talked him into putting a 440 in it.
Okay.
Well, I had a buddy in college that had a just all new built 440, but it was built for his car.
Right.
You know.
So it still wasn't cammed to pull.
No, it was unbelievable horsepower. I will never forget. We got that put over in that pickup, and Dad, of course, in on it, helping.
Yep.
He hops in, takes it out to the blacktop, and mashes it, and it lights up all 4 tires. It was a full-time four-wheel drive pickup. He came back in, his eyes were big, and he goes, "Now this thing's got some power." He told The problem was it had like 9 3/4 to 1 pistons in it. And we couldn't keep good enough gas in it.
Right.
This is just our, we weren't thinking this through. We got this great deal on this really good motor. Well, we were way off up in northern Illinois, just he and I, pulling somewhere. I do not remember where we were coming from, but we were coming back through about Galesburg on the interstate over there. And we're just tooling along. Everything's working fine. It was super hot.
Right.
Every once in a while, it'd ping a little bit, spark knock,
right.
And he'd just kind of back out of it. And we're tooling along, and a highway patrolman comes up behind us and turns the lights on. And I'm like, "Dad, are you speeding?" "No, I'm not even close." I'm like, "I wonder what he wants," And I look back in the mirror, and I kind of see a little bit of a haze of smoke. And so Dad pulls over, and the patrolman comes up, and he goes, "I don't know what's going on, boys," but he said, "There's so much smoke back there, I can't hardly see through it." And I'm like, "What?" He said, "You got a problem." And so it had cracked all the rings.
So you're pumping oil out of that motor.
Oh, it was pouring, and we had headers on it. It was pouring out underneath the valve covers. Had so much blow by. Still had all kinds of power. It had so much blow by. It was pumping oil out on the headers.
Oh God.
And burning it. So there was just this plume behind us.
Behind you, as long as you're moving, you didn't.
And
power.
So we're like, and I hopped out. I'm like, "Where's it?" And I look underneath the fender well, and oil is literally
Just
running on the ground. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Dad, we'll never make it home." And fortunately, we had like 5 gallons of oil.
Right.
Because we were off pulling in.
Heavyweight oil, probably.
Yep. And we'd stop about every 35, 40 miles and pour in a couple quarts. We made it home. And we learned a hard lesson. You can't run those type of engines in a tow vehicle.
Oh my gosh.
We just did a lot of, you're just wanting to go pull, and you just, you didn't think a lot of things through.
Well, now you have a lot more to work off of.
Right.
Oh yeah, there wasn't any Cummins
Back then,
diesel since.
Yeah, it was just what.
Oh yeah. Once the little Cummins diesel came along, we're Dodge fans, but once that little Cummins came along, oh my gosh, it just changed everything.
Oh, that was a great motor. Those things.
But
still love it.
And we don't have 100% brand loyalty to anything. I mean, you've been around the farm here just a little bit. You see, we got a Case IH in there, and we got John Deere, and we probably lean toward. You were asking about dealership things. I mean, we probably lean more towards John Deere now. It's just because
service.
The ability to drive 15 minutes and get parts.
Right. And that's the difficult part with any of it. It's just we don't have dealer networks like we did. We don't have as many brands as we once had.
No.
It's kind of down to just the core of what they were. But well, I want to thank you guys for joining us on Breaking Barriers podcast. I appreciate the time and taking the time out of the day to do all this. There's a lot of folks that have followed your family for years and years, and so I know they appreciate hearing all these stories. That's one of the things when we hear stories about that you've shared, like with the spring and things, a lot of folks relate to that. When we get into engine parts, we lose a lot of people pretty quick that are not familiar with it, so I appreciate that. Just want to thank everyone for watching this episode of Breaking Barriers podcast. Please follow and comment. If you have questions and you want to reach out to these guys and ask them, feel free to do that. If you have guests, anybody else you feel should be on, please drop a note in the comments as well and get me a phone number, because some of these numbers are hard to come by. Thank you again for watching this episode of Breaking Barriers Podcast.
Breaking Barriers.